You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome back to the Occult Rejects. This is part 3 of our deep dive into hypnosis. In part 1, we followed hypnosis from exorcism, Paracelsian medicine, religious healing, Johann Joseph Gassner, Mesmer's animal magnetism, the Baquette, Franklin's commission, P. Segura's magnetic somnambulism, Abe Faria, James Braid, and James Esdale into the birth of nervous sleep. In part 2, we watched hypnosis pass through Charcot's medical theater, the Nancy School's theory of suggestion, Pierre Genet's divided mind, the ideomotor effect, spiritualism, automatic writing, Freud, the occult revival, New Thought, autosuggestion, and the inner operator. The old magnetic fluid collapsed as physics, but it survived as psychology. What had once been explained as animal magnetism became suggestion, dissociation, nervous sleep, automatism, unconscious process, self-suggestion, and the strange fact that the human body can obey meaning. That is where part 3 begins. The occult theory has been broken, but the problem it exposed has not gone away. The fluid is gone, but the responsiveness remains. The Baquette is gone, but the charged room remains. The mesmerist's robe is gone, but the voice of authority remains. The trance chamber has changed shape. It has become the laboratory, the clinic, the therapist's office, the hospital ward, the stage, the scanner, and the private ritual of self-suggestion. The question is no longer simply whether Mesmer's animal magnetism was real. The question is what modern science, medicine, and performance do once they discover that attention, expectation, suggestion, authority, imagination, and fear can alter sensation, pain, agency, belief, and bodily experience. This third part is about that modern inheritance. Hypnosis does not remain a 19th century curiosity of magnetizers, hysterical patients, spiritualists, and occultists. It enters experimental psychology. It becomes something to test, scale, measure, compare, and argue over. It enters medicine and psychotherapy. It becomes a clinical tool for pain, anxiety, procedural distress, and bodily symptoms. It enters neuroscience and becomes a question of brain networks, attention, self-reference, body awareness, and control. It enters stage performance and becomes public theater. By the time we reach the end of this part, hypnosis will no longer look like a pocket watch or a magnetic tub. It will look like a mirror held up to the interpretive body. That phrase matters, the interpretive body. The body does not merely receive the world. It interprets, it predicts, it remembers, it learns whether a room is safe, whether a voice can be trusted, whether pain means injury, danger, punishment, purification, healing, ordeal, or transformation. It learns what certain words mean. It learns what certain symbols mean. It learns what certain smells, sounds, postures, rituals, and authorities mean. Hypnosis matters because it gives modern psychology and medicine one controlled way to study something ritual traditions have always worked with. The body responds not only to chemistry and injury, but to meaning. That does not mean hypnosis is mind control in the comic book sense. That has to be said clearly. This part is not going to claim that hypnosis turns people into remote control puppets. The historical record does not support that, and the science does not support that. But rejecting the cartoon does not mean dismissing the power. Hypnosis is not supernatural domination, but it is also not nothing. Suggestion can shape experience. It can relieve pain, change the felt quality of sensation, alter the sense of agency, and help some people regulate the body. It can also become performance, fantasy, manipulation, or a false certainty when handled badly. The mechanics are real enough to matter and fragile enough to require caution. The spine of part 3 is the modern body under suggestion. We will move through Clark Hull and the laboratory turn, 20th century medical respectability, Milton Erickson and clinical hypnosis, the modern definition of hypnosis, brain imaging, hypnotic anesthesia, placebo and treatment ritual, gut-directed hypnotherapy, hypnotizability, altered agency, and stage hypnosis. By the end, the question will not be whether hypnosis is magic or science. That division is too simple. The better question is why the same human openness can become healing in one room, public spectacle in another, and psychological transformation in another. Hypnosis survives because it touches a real human capacity, the ability of attention, image, expectation, and voice to enter the body. The first step into modern hypnosis is measurement. Once hypnosis leaves the magnetic chamber and enters psychology, the modern researcher wants to know what can be counted. How responsive are people? Or some people more hypnotizable than others? Are hypnotic responses real changes in experience? Or are they role-playing, compliance, expectation, dissociation, or some combination of all these? Can hypnosis produce measurable changes in memory, perception, pain, movement, and behavior? Can the dramatic claims be stripped down and tested in repeatable conditions? This is where Clark L. Hull belongs in the story. Hull was an American psychologist and one of the major figures in bringing hypnosis into experimental psychology. His 1933 work, Hypnosis and Suggestibility, an Experimental Approach, matters because it represents a very different kind of hypnosis than Mesmer's black cat. Hull is not asking the old question about animal magnetic fluid. He is not staging hysteria for medical spectators. He is not trying to prove occult force. He wants data. He wants controlled comparison. He wants to know what hypnosis does, what suggestion does, what can be measured, and what claims fail when tested. That laboratory turn is one of the great demystifications of hypnosis, but demystification does not mean disappearance. Hull does not make hypnosis vanish. He helps relocate it. The question becomes less cosmic and more behavioral, less theatrical and more experimental. Instead of asking whether a magnetic current passes from operator to subject, the researcher asks whether a suggestion changes performance, sensation, memory, movement, or response. Instead of asking whether the hypnotist possesses special power, the researcher asks how subject variability, expectation, instruction, wording, procedure, and context shape what happens. The occult drama is reduced, but the core fact remains. Some people respond strongly to suggestion under certain conditions. This is where hypnosis begins to look less like a single mysterious state and more like a field of problems. There is suggestibility, there is responsiveness, there is absorption, there is imagination, there is expectation, there is compliance, there is social pressure, there is dissociation, there is motivation, there is the subject's willingness to participate, there is the hypnotist's authority. There is the wording of suggestion, there is the setting, there is the measuring tool. Hypnosis stops being one giant word and becomes a cluster of phenomena. That may sound less dramatic than animal magnetism, but it is actually more useful. A vague mystery can impress people, but it cannot be handled carefully. Once hypnosis enters experimental psychology, better questions become possible. Which suggestions work reliably? Which subjects respond? What kind of responses are common and which are rare? Does hypnosis improve memory or only increase confidence? Does hypnotic anesthesia reduce pain, change attention to pain, alter emotional response to pain, or all of those at once? Does the subject feel involuntary action because the action is outside control or because the feeling of control has been altered? These are not boring academic questions. They decide whether hypnosis becomes medicine, theater, manipulation, or myth. Hull also helps mark the shift from charismatic operator to the measurable subject. In Mesmer's world, the power radiates from the magnetizer. In the laboratory, the subject becomes the variable. Some people respond deeply, some respond moderately, some barely respond at all. That fact alone damages the popular myth of the omnipotent hypnotist. If hypnosis were simply one will overpowering another, subject differences would matter far less. But they matter enormously. The hypnotic event is relational. The hypnotist provides structure, language, pacing, expectation, and authority, but the subject's own capacities complete the response. This is one of the most important corrections Part 3 has to make. Hypnosis is not a weapon that works the same way on every nervous system. It is not a universal override switch. It is not a magic word that erases consent and turns a human being into an object. It is also not mere pretending. Some people can experience powerful changes in perception, pain, memory, body image, movement, and agency under suggestion. Others cannot. The unevenness of the response is not a weakness in the story. It is part of the story. Human openness is real, but it is distributed unevenly. From the perspective of ritual, this should sound familiar. Not every person enters trance in the same way. Not every initiate responds to ordeal in the same way. Not every practitioner can scry, dream, visualize, chant, or enter absorption with the same intensity. Some people are highly responsive to symbol and atmosphere. Some need repetition and training. Some remain guarded. Some dissociate easily. Some resist. Some are moved by music. Others by silence. Others by visual force, breath, touch, pain, exhaustion, fasting, or group pressure. Human beings do not respond equally to ritual technologies, and hypnosis helps explain why. Hull's laboratory psychology also exposes a tension that will never leave the field. The more hypnosis is tested, the less it can remain an occult mystery. But the more it is tested, the more stubborn the phenomenon becomes. It refuses to collapse into one explanation. Is hypnosis an altered state? Is it a role enactment? Is it heightened expectation? Is it dissociation? Is it a special form of attention? Is it social compliance? Is it absorption? Is it imagination given bodily authority? The answer depends on the subject, the suggestion, the context, the measure, and the theory. The field becomes modern not because it finds one simple answer, but because it keeps finding that the human mind cannot be reduced to one simple answer. That is exactly why hypnosis remains so valuable for the mechanics of magic. It teaches us to be careful. The presence of trance does not prove a spirit. The presence of suggestion does not prove fraud. The presence of performance does not prove the experience is fake. The presence of measurable effect does not prove the metaphysical explanation attached to it. The real work is sorting levels of explanation. What happened physically? What happened psychologically? What happened socially? What happened symbolically? What did the subject experience? What did the tradition claim? What did the operator suggest? What did the room make possible? After Hull, hypnosis continues its slow climb back toward medical respectability. This is important because hypnosis had spent much of its history surrounded by suspicion. It had been linked to mesmerism, stage performance, hysteria, spiritualism, occultism, theatrical operators, and exaggerated claims. Many physicians viewed it with caution or contempt. But in the 20th century, especially around pain, dentistry, childbirth, burns, psychotherapy, and psychosomatic medicine, hypnosis began to regain legitimacy as a clinical tool. It did not become universally accepted, and it never lost its controversies, but it stopped being only a fringe spectacle. The medical legitimization of hypnosis is one of the stranger reversals in the whole story. A practice born from animal magnetism, attacked by Enlightenment science, absorbed into hysteria, tied to stage performance, and claimed by occultists begins to return to hospitals and clinics under a new identity. It returns stripped of magnetic fluid. It returns without the backhat. It returns without cosmic force. It returns as focused attention, relaxation, suggestion, imagery, and therapeutic responsiveness. The occult costume is removed, but the old problem remains. Words, images, expectation, and authority can affect the body. That does not mean the medical world accepts every claim. Clinical hypnosis is not a universal cure. It is not a replacement for surgery, anesthesia, medicine, psychotherapy, or medical diagnosis. It is an adjunct, a technique, a therapeutic procedure that can be useful under certain conditions for certain people. This cautious framing matters because hypnosis has always attracted exaggeration. Every age wants to make it absolute. Universal fluid, total control, perfect memory, instant healing, secret weapon, magical cure. The responsible position is more precise. Hypnosis can help some people with some symptoms through some mechanisms, especially when used by trained practitioners with informed consent and realistic expectations. This is where Milton Erickson enters the story. Erickson is one of the major figures in modern clinical hypnosis, and he changes the feel of hypnosis in the 20th century. He does not represent the old mesmeric commander standing over a passive subject. He represents a more strategic, indirect, flexible, and therapeutic approach. Erickson was famous for using stories, metaphors, indirect suggestions, conversational trance, and what came to be called utilization, meaning that the therapist works with the patient's own patterns rather than simply opposing a command from outside. Erickson is important because he softens the image of hypnosis without making it weak. In older popular imagination, the hypnotist dominates. Look into my eyes, sleep, obey. Erickson's style often looks more like guiding, pacing, storytelling, reframing, and inviting the subject's own unconscious resources to reorganize the problem. Whether one agrees with Erickson's claim or not, historically he helped shift clinical hypnosis away from crude command and toward therapeutic communication. The hypnotist becomes less a mesmer and more a strategist of language. This is a major transformation in the figure of the operator. Mesmer stands at the center of the room as the one who directs the current. Charcot stands at the front of the lecture hall as the one who classifies the hysterical body. The stage hypnotist stands before an audience and commands performance. Erickson, by contrast, often works through indirection. He tells a story, he uses the subject's resistance, he reframes a symptom, he allows trance to appear as a natural process rather than a theatrical collapse. The power is still there, but it becomes subtler. The command hides inside metaphor. This should immediately get our attention. Indirect suggestion may be gentler than domination, but it is also more invisible. A direct command announces itself. An indirect suggestion can slip beneath resistance because it does not look like a command. A story can carry an instruction. A metaphor can organize behavior. A casual phrase can become a seed. A therapeutic image can change the way a person relates to pain, fear, habit, or identity. This is one reason Erickson is so influential and also why the ethics of suggestion remain crucial. The more subtle the influence, the more important consent, context, and practitioner responsibility become. For the mechanics of magic, Erickson is fascinating because ritual often works indirectly too. A myth does not simply order the participant to change. It places the participant inside a symbolic story where change becomes imaginable. A god form does not merely say, be strong. It gives strength and image. An initiation does not merely say, you are different now. It surrounds the person with ordeal, secrecy, costume, gesture, title, symbolic death, and symbolic rebirth so that the difference can be experienced. A spell does not merely tell the mind to desire an outcome. It stages the desire through color, object, sound, timing, and embodied performance. Ritual is often indirect suggestion carried by symbol. Erickson's clinical work also points toward a key idea. Trance is not necessarily bizarre. It is not always the dramatic sleep of the stage act. It can be ordinary absorption intensified. People enter trance-like states while driving, praying, reading, watching fire, listening to music, scrolling, grieving, daydreaming, dancing, chanting, or becoming absorbed in a task. Hypnosis does not always have to create something alien. It can use capacities human beings already have. Attention narrows. The outside world recedes. Inner imagery becomes vivid. A repeated phrase becomes believable. The body begins to follow the state. This idea brings hypnosis closer to daily life and farther away from the pocket watch caricature. The hypnotic condition is not necessarily a supernatural expectation. It is a deliberate arrangement of normal capacities: attention, absorption, imagination, expectation, and responsiveness. This is exactly why it can be therapeutic and exactly why it can be manipulative. If hypnosis depended on rare magical force, most of us would be safe from it. But if it depends on capacities we use every day, then hypnosis is an intensified form of something culture is always doing to us. Erickson's influence also points toward another future episode: NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Neuro-linguistic programming borrows heavily from the reputation of Erickson, especially through modeling, language patterns, reframing, therapeutic communication, and claims about unconscious influence. But NLP should not be folded into the hypnosis episode because it becomes its own separate story. Therapy culture, self-help, persuasion systems, sales psychology, pseudoscience debates, charisma training, and the commercialization of programming the mind. Erickson belongs here because he is a major clinical hypnosis figure. NLP belongs later because it is a different mutation of the same inheritance. By the mid to late 20th century, hypnosis has multiple public faces. It is a clinical technique used by trained professionals. It is a laboratory phenomenon studied by psychologists. It is a stage act sold as entertainment. It is a self-help method in the form of relaxation tapes, autosuggestion, confidence training, and habit control. It is a spiritual and occult method in trance work, regression, guided visualization, mediumship, and ritual self-transformation. The word hypnosis now covers too much unless we keep asking what context we are in. That is why modern definitions matter. The American Psychological Association's Division 30 gives a useful description of hypnosis as involving focused attention, reduced peripheral awareness, and an enhanced capacity to respond to suggestion. That definition cuts away two bad myths at once. Hypnosis is not ordinary sleep. The subject is not unconscious in the simple sense, but hypnosis is also not meaningless theater. It is a modified attentional condition in which certain suggestions, images, sensations, and expectations can become unusually powerful. Focused attention means the field narrows. The subject is not equally open to everything in the environment. Certain cues become central while others fade. Reduced peripheral awareness means the background drops away. The usual noise of the world becomes less important. Enhanced responses to suggestion means the subject may experience suggested changes in sensation, perception, memory, movement, emotion, or bodily state more vividly than usual. That is the modern skeleton of the old mystery. No fluid is needed, no demon is needed, no supernatural domination is required. The nervous system, under the right conditions, is already capable of extraordinary responsiveness. This is the doorway into the modern science of hypnosis. Once hypnosis is understood in terms of focused attention and suggestion, it can be studied through psychology, neuroscience, pain research, memory research, and clinical trials. The questions become sharper. What changes in the brain during hypnosis? How does suggestion alter pain? Why are some people more hypnotizable than others? What happens to the sense of agency when a subject experiences an action as involuntary? Why can hypnosis sometimes help bodily symptoms? What is the difference between healing suggestion and manipulative suggestion? Part 3 lives inside those questions. The human being has not become less mysterious. The mystery has only become more technical. Instead of asking whether a universal fluid flows through the body, we ask how attention networks, self-referential processing, interoception, expectation, and agency are reorganized under suggestion. The language has changed, but the deeper issue is still the same. Words can enter flesh. Once hypnosis enters modern science, the old question of invisible force becomes a question of symptoms. No serious clinical researcher needs Mesmer's magnetic fluid. No one needs the baquette. No one needs the idea that a cosmic current is being directed from operator to subject. The modern researcher asks something colder and more technical. What happens to attention, self-monitoring, body awareness, pain processing, expectation, and agency when a person enters hypnosis? What changes in the brain when suggestion becomes unusually powerful? What is altered when a word does not remain only a word but becomes sensation? That is the modern version of the old occult problem. Mesmer asks how an invisible fluid could move through the body. The neuroscientist asks how networks of attention, salience, self-reference, and bodily awareness shift under suggestion. The terms are different, but the human problem underneath them has continuity. Hypnosis has always forced the same question: how does meaning become bodily event? In the 18th century, that question was answered through magnetism. In the 19th century, through nervous sleep, suggestion, hysteria, and dissociation. In the 21st century, through functional connectivity, executive control, interoception, default mode activity, and pain modulation. One useful modern anchor is the brain imaging work associated with Heidi Yang, Matthew White, Michael Grecius, Laura Weld, and David Spiegel. Their study on brain activity and functional connectivity during hypnosis does not give us a single hypnosis center in the brain, because there is no simple button called hypnosis. Instead, it points toward changes in the relationship between networks. During hypnosis, they reported reduced activity in the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, increased functional connectivity between the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex and the insula, and reduced connectivity between executive control regions and the default mode network. Those names sound technical, so they need to be translated. The dorsal anterior cingulate is often discussed in relation to attention, conflict monitoring, and the detection of competing demands. The dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex is involved in executive control, planning, and top-down regulation. The insula is deeply involved in body awareness, internal sensation, and the felt sense of what is happening inside the organism. The default mode network is associated with self-referential thinking, mind-wandering, autobiographical narrative, and the background story of me that the mind keeps generating. So when these systems change their relationship during hypnosis, the basic picture is not sleep and not empty obedience. It is altered organization. Attention, control, body awareness, and self-narrative begin relating differently. That matters because hypnosis does not erase the subject. The subject is not unconscious in the ordinary sense. The subject is absorbed, responsive, and reorganized. The ordinary chatter of self-monitoring may become quieter. The suggested image may become more vivid. The instruction may land more deeply. The body may become more available to interpretation. The person may feel less like they are deliberately forcing something and more like the suggested experience is happening. That is one of the reasons hypnosis has always felt uncanny. It changes not only what the person experiences, but how the person experiences authorship over the experience. This is where modern neuroscience gives us a more disciplined language for an old magical observation. Ritual traditions have long known that certain conditions quiet the ordinary self and make symbolic material more powerful. Darkness, rhythm, incense, chanting, fasting, gazing, repetition, fatigue, synchronized movement, ordeal, isolation, and authoritative speech. Hypnosis studies one controlled version of that larger family of processes. The modern scanner does not prove the spirit world, and it does not prove that the ritual claims are literally true. But it does support a more basic point. Altered attention is not merely an idea. It has bodily and neural correlates. When attention, expectation, imagery, and suggestion are arranged in certain ways, the person's experience can change at a deep level. The clinical place where this becomes impossible to dismiss is pain. Pain is where hypnosis meets flesh most directly. Pain seems, at first, like the least negotiable thing in the world. The body is hurt and pain appears. But pain is not a simple alarm bell ringing at a fixed volume. Pain is constructed through bodily signals, attention, emotion, memory, fear, prediction, context, and meaning. The same physical injury can be experienced differently depending on whether the person feels safe, terrified, distracted, supported, abandoned, ashamed, or in control. The body sends signals, but the nervous system interprets them. Hypnosis enters that interpretive system. This is why hypnotic anesthesia is so important. It destroys the lazy phrase, "it is just in your head." Pain is always in the nervous system, but that does not make it fake. The nervous system is not imaginary. Brain and body are not separate kingdoms. If a hypnotic suggestion reduces pain, that does not prove the pain was unreal. It proves pain is an experience shaped by attention and meaning. It proves that real suffering can be modulated by the conditions under which the body interprets itself. Montgomery, Duhamel, and Redd's meta-analysis of hypnotically induced anesthesia found a moderate to large hypnoanalgesic effect across the studies they reviewed. That kind of evidence matters because it moves hypnosis out of sideshow territory. Hypnosis can reduce pain for some people under some conditions. That statement is strong enough to matter and cautious enough to remain honest. It is not a miracle anesthetic. It is not a universal effect. It does not replace medicine. It does not work equally for everyone. But it shows that suggestion, absorption, imagery, and expectation can affect the experience of pain in measurable ways. The mechanism does not have to be mystical in order to be profound. A person in hypnosis may be guided to reinterpret pain as pressure, warmth, distance, numbness, fading sensation, or a signal that can be observed without panic. They may imagine the painful area as cooling, floating, protected, or separated from ordinary awareness. They may be asked to shift attention away from the pain or change the emotional meaning attached to it. They may learn to experience sensation without the same fear of anticipation. Those suggestions do not magically erase the body. They change the way the nervous system attends to and evaluates the body. This gives ritual practice one of its clearest scientific mirrors. Many healing rites do not only give medicine to the body, they change the meaning of suffering. They tell the person that the pain is leaving, that the spirit is departing, that the wound is being sealed, that the God has heard, that the curse is broken, that the heat is being drawn out, that the sickness is moving into an object, that the burden has been transformed, that the body is no longer alone. A modern clinician may not accept the literal ritual explanation, but the structure is recognizable. Pain and distress are being reframed inside a symbolic system powerful enough for the body to respond. That does not mean every ritual cure works. It does not mean people should abandon medical care. It does not mean suggestion can fix everything. But it does mean ritual healing should not be dismissed as meaningless merely because its metaphysics are disputed. A rite can fail as supernatural physics and still work as emotional regulation, social support, expectation, attention training, placebo response, stress reduction, and embodied meaning. That is the same lesson we have been learning since the Franklin Commission. They claimed force may fail, but the human response may remain. Hypnotic anesthesia also brings us back to James Esdale. In part 1, Esdale's mesmeric surgery in Bengal forced the question of pain onto the surgical body. His 19th century reports do not meet modern evidence standards, and they sit inside the power imbalances of colonial medicine. But the questions he raised remains alive in modern research. Can altered attention change suffering? Modern hypnotic anesthesia answers the question in a more careful way. Yes. In some cases, for some subjects, under structured conditions, suggestion could alter the pain. The old mesmeric drama becomes a clinical research question. This also gives us a more honest way to talk about placebo. Placebo is often treated like a synonym for fate, but that is a weak understanding. Placebo effects involve expectation, meaning, conditioning, trust, ritual, and the therapeutic relationship. A placebo response does not mean nothing happened. It means the body responded to the meaning and context of treatment. Hypnosis overlaps this territory, but it is not identical to it. It deliberately uses attention, imagery, and suggestion to shape experience. In that sense, hypnosis is not an embarrassment to medicine. It is a reminder that medicine always takes place inside meaning. The doctor's coat, the tone of voice, the explanation of the illness, the confidence of the practitioner, the environment of treatment, the machines in the room, the smell of antiseptic, the ritual of examination, the prescription, and the follow-up all shape expectation. Modern medicine is not free from ritual. It is filled with ritual, but it usually calls that ritual procedure. Hypnosis makes the symbolic side of medicine more obvious. It shows that the patient's body is not only receiving interventions, it is also interpreting them. This becomes especially clear in gut-directed hypnotherapy for irritable bowel syndrome. IBS is one of the strongest modern examples because it lives at the intersection of body, nervous system, stress, sensation, attention, and meaning. The gut-brain axis is not a metaphor. The gut and brain communicate through autonomic pathways, immune signaling, endocrine systems, microbial factors, visceral sensation, stress physiology, and patterns of attention. The gut is not separate from the mind, and the mind is not floating above the gut. They are in conversation constantly. In IBS, symptoms such as abdominal pain, bloating, bowel irregularity, urgency, constipation, diarrhea, and visceral sensitivity can be intensified by dysregulated gut-brain communication. A normal bodily sensation may become threatening, attention may lock onto the gut, anxiety may amplify sensation, fear of symptoms may create more arousal, and that arousal may worsen symptoms. The person becomes trapped in a loop where the body signals, the mind monitors, the nervous system reacts, and the gut responds again. Gut-directed hypnotherapy enters that loop and tries to change the conversation. This is not stage hypnosis. No one is being made to bark, cluck, or perform humiliation for an audience. Gut-directed hypnotherapy usually involves relaxation, guided imagery, suggestions for comfort and regulation, and metaphors of soothing, control, rhythmic movement, projection, or normalization of gut function. The subject may be guided to imagine the gut as a calm water, a smoothly functioning river, a protected channel, or another regulating image. The image is not a childish fantasy. It is a way of giving the nervous system a new pattern to rehearse. The body learns through repeated symbolic instruction. This is why gut-directed hypnotherapy fits so perfectly inside the mechanics of magic. The old ritual world believed words and images could act inside the body. Modern gut hypnotherapy does not need to invoke spirits, planets, demons, or astral light, but it uses the same general human opening: image, repetition, attention, calm, voice, expectation, and bodily interpretation. The gut is being addressed through symbol. The nervous system is being taught a new story about sensation. The body is asked to stop interpreting itself as a constant threat. Peter Horwell's work helped establish gut-directed hypnotherapy as a serious intervention for IBS, and later researchers such as Olafur Paulson developed structured protocols that became influential. Reviews of the field have found durable benefits for IBS patients, while still emphasizing that more research is needed into mechanisms, predictors of response, and where the treatment should sit in the therapeutic arsenal. That balanced framing is important. Gut-directed hypnotherapy is not magic, but it is also not nonsense. It is a clinical method that uses trance, imagery, and suggestion to affect a disorder where brain, gut, attention, stress, and sensation are tightly interwoven. This section also helps the audience understand why the body is not a simple machine. A machine either has a broken part or it does not. But a living nervous system can become sensitized, hypervigilant, conditioned, fearful, and responsive to meaning. A gut can hurt not because the person is pretending, but because the nervous system has learned to interpret gut signals as danger. A pain can persist not because it is imaginary, but because attention, fear, memory, and prediction have become part of the pain system. Hypnosis works in this territory because it speaks to the interpretive body. That phrase, the interpretive body, is one of the keys to the whole episode. The body does not merely receive the world, it interprets it, it predicts it, it prepares, it remembers, it learns what certain sensations mean, it learns whether a room is safe, it learns whether a voice can be trusted, it learns whether pain means injury, punishment, danger, purification, healing, ordeal, or transformation. Ritual systems have always worked with the interpretive body. Hypnosis gives modern science one way to study it. This is also where the ethics of clinical hypnosis begin. If the body interprets, then the practitioner must be careful what interpretation is given. A suggestion can reduce fear, but it can also create fear. A metaphor can soothe, but it can also contaminate. A phrase can organize healing, but it can also install a false certainty. A clinician telling a patient your body can learn calm is doing something very different from an authority figure telling a subject your pain proves you are possessed, or your memory will now reveal what really happened, or you cannot trust yourself unless I guide you. The words matter because the body listens. Clinical hypnosis is strongest when it respects the subject's agency. It should not be the operator conquering the patient. It should not be a dramatic invasion of the mind. It should be a structured cooperation in which the subject learns to use attention, imagery, and suggestion for relief or regulation. That distinction matters because hypnosis always carries the shadow of mesmer. The operator's authority can return under new names. The therapist, healer, guru, doctor, or ritualist can all become too powerful if the subject's vulnerability is not protected. The best clinical use of hypnosis therefore reverses the old domination fantasy. The goal is not to make the subject dependent on the hypnotist. The goal is to give the subject more skill with their own nervous system. In pain work, that may mean learning to alter attention and reduce fear. In gut work, it may mean learning to calm visceral hypervigilance. In anxiety work, it may mean rehearsing safety. In procedural distress, it may mean creating absorption and control during a frightening medical event. The operator guides, but the subject gains capacity. That is the ethical difference between therapeutic suggestion and control. This also gives us a way to rethink magical training. The point of a serious ritual system should not be to make the practitioner dependent on the teacher's voice forever. It should develop the practitioner's own capacity to enter, navigate, interpret, and exit altered states with discernment. A ritual that only increases dependence is not initiation, it is capture. A suggestion that only makes the subject obedient is not healing, it is conditioning. Hypnosis teaches us that trance without agency is dangerous. That state itself is not the goal. The integration of the state is the goal. By the time modern clinical hypnosis reaches pain and gut-directed work, the story has come a long way from mesmer. The old magnetic fluid is gone, the baquette is gone, the theory of cosmic current is gone, but the practical question is still there. Can a voice change sensation? Can image alter bodily experience? Can attention reshape pain? Can expectation calm or inflame the nervous system? Can repeated symbolic instruction train the body into a new response? The modern answer is cautious but real. Under the right conditions, for some people, yes. That answer is enough to explain why hypnosis has never disappeared. It survives because it touches a real human capacity. It keeps being exaggerated, mocked, revived, medicalized, spiritualized, commercialized, and weaponized because it sits at the crossing of mind and body. Hypnosis is not the key to everything, but it is one of the clearest demonstrations that the body is not sealed against meaning. The nervous system hears stories. It responds to images. It predicts from expectation. It can suffer under a symbol and sometimes heal through one. And that brings us to the next problem. Not everyone responds the same way. If hypnosis can alter pain, gut sensation, perception, and bodily experience, then we have to ask why some people are more responsive than others. Is hypnotizability a talent, a vulnerability, a trait, a state, a skill, or a social performance? Why do some people enter deeply into suggestion while others remain almost untouched? And what happens to the sense of self when the subject experiences a suggested action as involuntary? That is where the next movement begins. Hypnotizability, altered agency, and the strange feeling that something is happening through you, but not exactly by you. The next problem is hypnotizability. Once hypnosis becomes a clinical and an experimental subject, researchers have to confront a fact that destroys the fantasy of universal mind control. Not everyone responds the same way. Some people enter hypnosis easily and experience vivid changes in perception, sensation, memory, body image, and agency. Some respond modestly. Some experience relaxation and focused attention but little else. Some barely respond at all. That unevenness is not a side issue. It is one of the central facts of hypnosis. The subject matters. This is where the Stanford Hypnotic Susceptibility Scale becomes important. Associated especially with André Weitzenhoffer and Ernest Hilgard, these scales attempted to standardize the measurement of hypnotic responsiveness. Instead of relying only on dramatic stories or the claims of charismatic operators, researchers could give subjects a series of suggestions and score the response. Arm heaviness, hand lowering, taste change, smell hallucination, amnesia, age regression, dreamlike imagery, post-hypnotic suggestion, and other classic hypnotic phenomena. The point was not that every subject would show every response. The point was to create a way of comparing responsiveness across people. That changed the whole mythology of hypnosis. If the hypnotist were an all-powerful controller, susceptibility scales would be less important. The operator would simply impose the state. But research shows something more complicated. Hypnosis is relational. The hypnotist matters, but the subject's own capacities matter enormously. The subject brings attention, expectation, imagination, absorption, trust, motivation, compliance, resistance, dissociative ability, and prior beliefs about hypnosis into the room. The hypnotist guides the process, but the subject's nervous system completes it. Hypnosis is not poured into the person from outside. It happens through the person. This is one of the strongest corrections to the public myth. Popular culture imagines the hypnotic subject as weak-willed, gullible, helpless, or empty. That is not the right model. Highly hypnotizable people are not simply stupid or submissive. They are highly imaginative, highly absorbed, able to become deeply involved in inner experience, and capable of allowing a suggestion to become vivid enough that it feels less like pretend and more like happening. That is not weakness, it is capacity. The problem is that every human capacity has an ethical shadow. Absorption can become healing, creativity, prayer, trance, and pain relief. But it can also become vulnerability to manipulation when placed under the wrong authority. Hypnotizability also helps explain why ritual practices affect people so differently. One person may hear a chant and feel nothing. Another may feel the body shift immediately. One person may stare into a candle flame and become restless. Another may fall into deep absorption. One person may perform an invocation and experience it as theatrical recitation. Another may feel the God form become present in the body. One person may sit in a lodge room, temple, church, sweat lodge, seance, or meditation hall and remain fully ordinary. Another may feel identity loosen, memory stir, and emotion rise from somewhere old and deep. The technique is never acting on a neutral machine. It is meeting a nervous system with its own history and thresholds. This is why serious ritual systems often require preparation, repetition, purification, discipline, rehearsal, and training. They are not only trying to please a god or follow inherited form. They are shaping responsiveness. The practitioner learns how to enter the state. The body learns what the bell means, what the incense means, what the robe means, what the names mean, what the posture means, what the breath means. Over time, these cues become doors. The nervous system is trained to cross a threshold. Hypnotizability may be partly measured as a trait in research, but ritual responsiveness can also be cultivated through practice, expectation, and repeated association. That does not mean everyone can be trained into the same depth of trance. That is another exaggeration. People differ. Some people are naturally more absorbed. Some are more guarded. Some dissociate easily, sometimes because of trauma, sometimes because of temperament, sometimes because of practice, sometimes because of unknown factors. Some people resist surrendering control. Some enter trance only through movement of rhythm, not stillness. Some respond to voice, others to images, others to touch, music, exhaustion, darkness, or group synchrony. A serious occult psychology should expect difference, not pretend one method opens every door. The next issue is agency. Agency is the felt sense that I am the one doing this. It is not the same as action itself. A person can move the hand and feel I moved it. But under hypnosis, suggestion, trance, possession, dissociation, or automatic writing, that feeling can change. The hand may rise, but the person experiences it as rising by itself. The voice may answer, but the person feels as if the answer arrived before deliberate thought. The body may become heavy, warm, numb, or rigid without the person feeling like they consciously produced it. A suggested action can be performed while the conscious self feels more like an observer than a commander. This altered agency is one of the reasons hypnosis has always lived near the supernatural. When a person acts without feeling like the author, human beings reach for explanations. Something moved me. Something spoke through me. Something entered me. Something used my hand. Something took over. In religious settings, that may become possession, inspiration, the Holy Spirit, a god, an ancestor, or a demon. In spiritualism, it may become mediumship. In occultism, it may become invocation, channeling, astral, contact, automatic writing, or the descent of a force into the body. In psychology, it may become dissociation, ideomotor action, altered metacognition, or unconscious process. The experience of not me demands a name, and every culture supplies one. Hypnosis gives us a controlled way to study that experience. A subject may be told that their arm is being lighter, that it is being lifted by balloons, that it is raising all by itself, and then the arm begins to rise. The movement may involve ordinary muscles, but the experience is not ordinary. The subject may not feel as if they decided to raise the arm. The suggested image organizes the movement, and the feeling of authorship weakens. That is why the phenomenon is uncanny. It shows that agency is constructed. The brain does not merely move the body, it also generates a story about who caused the movement. Under hypnosis, that story can be altered. This is one of the deepest links between hypnosis and magic. Ritual magic often deliberately changes authorship. The magician evokes a divine name and speaks as more than the everyday self. The priest stands at the altar and speaks with the authority of a tradition. The medium allows another voice to enter. The shaman lets the spirit act through the body. The ecstatic dancer becomes the deity, the animal, the ancestor, or the force. The initiate receives a new name and performs as a different identity. These are not all hypnosis, and they are not all the same phenomenon, but they all work near the same border, the border where action no longer feels like it belongs only to the ordinary ego. This is why the feeling of involuntariness is so important. In hypnosis, involuntariness does not necessarily mean the subject literally lost all control in the mechanical sense. It means the subject experiences the response as happening. The arm rises, the eyelids close, the hand becomes numb, the imagined smell becomes vivid, the suggested amnesia appears. The body responds without the ordinary feeling of effort. That feeling is part of what makes hypnosis powerful and also part of what makes it dangerous. When people experience something as happening to them rather than through them, they may assign the cause to the hypnotist, the spirit, the god, the demon, the dead, the drug, the state, or the hidden unconscious. That attribution matters. If a clinician helps a patient experience numbness during a procedure, the altered agency may be useful. The patient feels relief and gains skill. If a stage hypnotist uses the same altered agency to make someone perform humiliation, the altered agency becomes entertainment. If a guru uses it to convince a follower that a spirit or divine force is commanding obedience, it becomes manipulation. If an interrogator uses pressure, drugs, fear, and suggestion to make a subject doubt their own agency, it becomes violation. The phenomenon itself does not determine the ethics, the structure of power does. This brings us naturally to stage hypnosis. Stage hypnosis is the public theater of suggestibility. It is one of the main reasons the public misunderstands hypnosis, but it is also one of the best places to see hypnosis as ritual performance. A stage hypnotist does not simply walk into a random room and overpower everyone. The show is built. The audience comes expecting hypnosis. Volunteers step forward already accepting the possibility that something unusual may happen. The hypnotist usually selects responsive participants and sends others back. The lighting, microphone, crowd, laughter, authority, speed, pacing, and social pressure all shape the event before the first suggestion fully lands. The stage itself is a threshold. The person who walks onto it has crossed from ordinary social life into performance space. They are no longer merely a private individual. They are now a participant in a public rite with comic rules. The audience expects them to respond. The hypnotist expects them to respond. They may expect themselves to respond. Laughter rewards the role. Attention intensifies the role. The subject may discover that it is easier to go along than to resist, and then easier to still experience the role as happening. Stage hypnosis lives in that borderland between compliance, imagination, social performance, altered agency, and genuine subjective experience. This is why saying stage hypnosis is fake is too crude. Some stage hypnosis is exaggerated. Some subjects may play along more than they later admit. Some may respond mainly because of social pressure. Some may experience genuine altered absorption. Some may move between performance and involuntariness in the same act. The reality is mixed, and that mixture is exactly what makes it valuable for this episode. Stage hypnosis shows that performance and sincerity are not clean opposites. A person can perform a role so fully that the role becomes experience. A person can cooperate and still feel surprised by what happens. A person can know they are on a stage and still enter the shared reality of the performance. This same principle applies far beyond entertainment. Social life is filled with stage identities that become felt realities. Put someone in a uniform, and they may stand differently. Give someone a title, and they may speak differently. Place someone inside an initiation, and they may feel reborn. Put someone in front of a congregation, and they may feel possessed by the sermon. Put someone in a courtroom, and they may become the witness, the accused, the judge, the victim, the expert. Human beings live through roles, and roles can become embodied. Stage hypnosis is the comic version of a much larger human fact. The stage hypnotist also uses rapid authority. There is no long philosophical lecture. The hypnotist acts certain. Certainty itself becomes part of the induction. The subject is told what is happening, what will happen next, how they will feel, and what their body will do. Hesitation is minimized. Ambiguity is reduced. The subject is kept moving. In magical terms, this resembles the authority of the operator who does not plead with the ritual space, but commands it. In psychological terms, it reduces time for critical reflection and builds a chain of compliance and expectation. Each small response prepares the next larger one. The chain matters. Stage hypnosis often begins with simple suggestions: relaxation, eyes closing, hands locking, body leaning, becoming heavy, becoming light. Once the subject experiences a small response, belief increases. Once belief increases, the next response becomes easier. The subject learns quickly that the hypnotist's words predict experience. This is the same logic behind many ritual escalations. A small sign confirms the working. The confirmation intensifies belief. Intensified belief makes the next sign more powerful. The event builds its own atmosphere. This is also where embarrassment and permission enter. In ordinary life, people cannot easily act absurdly in public without shame. Stage hypnosis gives permission. The subject can do ridiculous things because the role explains the behavior. I was hypnotized becomes a social license. It allows the person to violate ordinary inhibition while preserving identity. That does not make the behavior meaningless. It means hypnosis can create a temporary exemption from ordinary self-policing. In some therapeutic settings, that loosening can be useful. On stage, it becomes comedy. In darker settings, it can become exploitation. For occult ritual, this point is important. Ritual also gives permission. It allows tears, trembling, chanting, confession, crawling, kneeling, dancing, masking, possession, ecstatic speech, and symbolic death in a way ordinary life does not. It creates a frame where unusual behavior is allowed and given meaning. A person may be unable to weep in daily life but weep in ritual. They may be unable to speak grief directly but speak it through prayer. They may be unable to access anger until it is given a mythic form. The ritual frame permits experience. Stage hypnosis permits comic absurdity. Therapy permits confession. Possession rites permit another voice. The frame determines what kind of altered behavior becomes acceptable. The danger is that permission can become pressure. A person may feel expected to have a trance, expected to tremble, expected to fall, expected to remember, expected to surrender, expected to perform transformation. This is one of the dangers in both hypnosis and ritual groups. If the group rewards certain signs, people may begin to produce them, consciously or unconsciously. If a teacher says real initiation feels a certain way, students may learn to feel it. If a stage hypnotist rewards dramatic response, volunteers may become more dramatic. If a therapist expects hidden trauma, the client may search for it. If a mediumship circle expects spirit voices, inner imagery may be shaped into messages. Suggestion is not always verbal. Sometimes the group teaches the body what to count as proof. That brings us back to the ethics of agency. The question is not only whether the subject acts voluntarily or involuntarily. The question is whether the subject can leave the role. Can they say no? Can they refuse a suggestion? Can they interpret their own experience? Can they return to ordinary identity without shame, fear, dependency, or confusion? Can they disagree with the operator? Can they say that image was only an image, or does the authority force one interpretation onto them? Healthy hypnosis and healthy ritual must protect exit. Coercive systems destroy exit. Stage hypnosis sits in a morally complicated place because it often depends on embarrassment. But it also usually exists inside an entertainment contract. People volunteer. They know it is a show. The audience knows it's a show. That does not make all stage hypnosis harmless, but it gives it a frame. The darker problem appears when stage dynamics enter spaces where people do not realize they are performing for authority. Therapy rooms, spiritual groups, political crowds, interrogation settings, online cults, and communities where belonging depends on producing the expected sign. Then the comic mechanism becomes serious. The public fascination with stage hypnosis also keeps the old mesmeric myth alive. People watch someone apparently lose control and think, the hypnotist has power. But a better reading is, the situation has power. The hypnotist, the subject, the audience, the stage, the expectation, the selection process, the role, the laughter, and the subject's own absorption all combine. There is no need for magnetic fluid. There is no need for supernatural domination. The human social nervous system is already enough. That phrase, the social nervous system, belongs here. Human beings regulate themselves through other human beings. We take cues from faces, voices, crowds, authority, rhythm, laughter, silence, and attention. We learn what is safe, what is expected, what is forbidden, what is funny, what is sacred, what is shameful, and what is powerful by reading the group. Hypnosis intensifies that process. Stage hypnosis makes it visible. Ritual formalizes it. Therapy tries to heal through it. Politics can weaponize it. The same basic human openness runs through all of them. This is why hypnotizability, agency, and stage hypnosis belong together. Hypnotizability tells us that people differ in their own capacity to respond. Agency tells us that the feeling of authorship can be altered. Stage hypnosis shows that altered agency does not happen in a vacuum. It happens inside a social frame. The subject is not a machine. The hypnotist is not a wizard. The stage is not neutral. The response is produced in the relationship between body, belief, role, expectation, and audience. By this point in part 3, we have moved from laboratory measurement to the altered feeling of self. Hypnosis can be tested, but it also has to be felt. It is not only a score on a susceptibility scale. It is the strangeness of the arm rising by itself, the pain fading under suggestion, the gut calming under imagery, the subject laughing on stage because the role has become real enough to inhabit, the person realizing that the conscious ego is not the whole author of action. That is why hypnosis still feels occult when the science is careful. It touches the place where the self discovers it is not as sovereign as it thought. By the end of this third part, hypnosis has become almost unrecognizable from Mesmer's animal magnetism, and yet the original problem remains. Mesmer believed an invisible fluid moved through bodies. Modern psychology no longer needs that fluid, but it still finds bodies moved by expectation, image, word, attention, authority, and atmosphere. The Baquette has become the clinic, the laboratory, the scanner, the pain protocol, the gut-brain treatment, and the stage. The old magnetic crisis has become altered agency, hypnotic responsiveness, anesthesia, absorption, and the interpretive body. That is the real modern inheritance. Hypnosis survives because the body is not sealed against meaning. Pain can be changed by attention. Gut sensation can be changed by imagery. The sense of authorship can be altered by suggestion. Public role can become private experience. Ritual cues can train the nervous system. A voice can give the body a new way to interpret itself. None of this proves supernatural domination, and none of it makes hypnosis omnipotent. But it does prove that the human being is far more open than the rational ego wants to admit. This openness is why hypnosis can heal, and why it must be handled carefully. The same mechanics that allow a patient to reduce pain can allow a performer to produce spectacle. The same altered agency that can help a person experience relief can be used to humiliate, pressure, or manipulate. The same symbolic framing that can make ritual transformation can also make a person dependent on authority. The mechanics are not moral by themselves. Meaning, purpose, consent, skill, transparency, and exit determine whether the work strengthens the person or captures them. This is where the next part has to go. Once hypnosis shows that sensation, agency, pain, body awareness, and belief can be altered, the most dangerous question appears. What happens when hypnosis is aimed at memory? Can trance recover the hidden past, or can it create false certainty? Can a guided image become a false memory? Can a witness become more confident without becoming more accurate? Can therapy, regression, interrogation, or ritual confession manufacture truth by mistake? And if memory, fear, agency, and confession can be influenced, what happens when state power enters the room? That is the threshold of part 4. Memory, false certainty, forensic hypnosis, recovered memory controversy, confession, truth drug fantasies, bluebird, artichoke, MK Ultra, and the dream of forcing open the hidden interior of the person. The fluid is gone. The body still listens. And now the question becomes whether the past can be hypnotized too. And that's the end of another Occult Rejects. Hope you all enjoyed, and until the next one.